Hello everybody and welcome to the XOG Query Bridge webinar this morning with IT-ROI Solutions. And I'm going to cover some housekeeping items, give a little background, and then I'll cover those housekeeping items again before we jump into the main part of the webinar today, because we have a lot of people that are logging in, and it looks like about half of the people are logged in now, but we'll give them a few minutes to do so. The first thing is if you're logged in right now and you don't have a XOG Bridge account, pop over to our website at xogbridge.itroisolutions.com and register for a XOG Bridge account so that you can follow along. To give a little history, IT-ROI Solutions started as a group of PPM consultants, and as entrepreneurs often do, as a result for the need to make PPM simpler, Federico Peña and our team of experts created tools along the way to attempt to make such a large and complex application simpler. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to have a look at a tool that was enhanced and created by our team here at IT-ROI that will enable you to better utilize your XOG queries. And so going back to a little bit of housekeeping, what we're going to do today is Federico is going to give a short demonstration. But in addition to that, what we would really like to accomplish here, the format and purpose of this webinar is to have people ask their questions, to ask real case study type questions that we may even be able to solve right here in the webinar. So if you look to the right-hand part of your screen in the GoToWebinar console, there is a place on the bottom that will allow you to ask questions as we go along. Federico will stop and address those questions as applicable, and then at the end we will open it up to hopefully what you guys have for us as more challenging time use cases that we might be able to work through in real time. So going back to the first housekeeping item that I mentioned in the beginning, if you don't have a XOG Bridge account, log on to xogbridge@itroisolutions.com and activate an account so that you're able to follow along.
Christopher, I just want to stop you for a second. We're having some issues. Some people are saying that they can't hear us. I see one person that says that they can hear us, but I'm getting a bunch of questions of people asking if we're speaking because they can't hear us. Okay, I'm getting audio is good. I can hear you fine. Okay, sorry, Christopher. It just appears that there's a couple of people that are having issues. Go ahead.
Just really quickly, in the mic and speakers part of the GoToMeeting console, if you're having trouble hearing, there's a drop-down box within the mic and speaker section that will allow you to select all of the different devices that you utilize on your computer for audio. Hopefully that'll help you with your technical difficulties. So moving on, the last point that I made was to make sure you download the XOG Query tool at IT-ROI Solutions website. And the format again, please ask your questions in the chat box. And if you have an issue that you're facing currently that you'd like to share, please type that into the chat, and we'll see that if Federico cannot assist you in solving that issue right here live if there's time. So our topics for today are going to be, first of all, Federico is going to cover the XOG Query Bridge and go over the tool stack, its foundations, how to utilize it, the different forms that you can get it in. He's going to go over a couple of use cases for you on the XOG Data Loader tool. He's going to utilize some of our use cases and give some examples of how he uses the XOG Data Extractor tool. And then finally, he's going to use some case studies that we have for using the SQL Query tool. Now, at the end of this, hopefully you'll all feel the way that many do, that this is absolutely a super CAPPM makes CAPPM simpler tool, and I can't emphasize enough that we're super fortunate to have Federico. Many people contend that he may be one of the most foremost experts in Clarity PPM, as I think that he's been doing this now for more than 15 years, even though he appears to be a young man. So with that introduction, Federico, I was wondering if you would like to take over the controls and go ahead and begin going through the XOG Query Bridge. And I'll be standing by answering questions that I can answer, and if anybody has any, I'll try to get you set up with your technical difficulties. Federico?
Thanks, Christopher. So I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar. So a lot of today's webinar is actually going to be based on the XOG Query Bridge. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you the power of what this tool set can actually help you do. So you can, you don't necessarily need to have extreme XOG knowledge to be able to do a lot of the XOGing work. We're going to cover a few different tools. So one of them is going to be the Execute a Query. So what's the Execute a Query tool mean? It means that you can now pick any NSQL within inside of your Clarity environment and export it to Excel via this tool. So this utilizes what's called the Query API. It'll grab that data and automatically bring it for you to be able to download. The XOG request tool, this particular tool has two separate windows. And let me just log into a Clarity environment first here. So basically what it has a window similar to what the old Clarity used to have. It used to have a XOG.client window. So this has a XOG client window where you paste in your request here, you get your response here. The only thing is we do limit the size of this request to 40,000 characters. If you need to put something larger than that, so let's say you have an object read or that kind of thing, you want to go to the bulk request and you browse for your XML file or your zip file. And I'm going to talk about the difference between the two. But basically, if you wanted to do a zip file, is let's say you have 50 XML files that you want to load at the same time, you just zip them up, you put them in a zip file, and this will automatically do them one after the other until it's complete. And last but not least, we're going to talk about our new Data Loader tool. So the Data Loader tool, what it actually does is it allows you to map CSV file or Excel files directly into XOG files. So we're going to cover this. Now I know that we do have a couple of questions around SaaS environments. So this is very handy for Clarity on Demand. So this works perfectly with Clarity on Demand. If you are on premise, what we do recommend is some of the functionality, because this won't have access to access your Clarity that's on premise. I'm going to recommend that you download the desktop version, and we're going to cover that. But basically, the desktop version has the same functionality as the web version. But you want to download that to be able to execute requests against your Clarity environment. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started by just showing basic information on how to actually run a XOG request. So like I said, there's two ways to run a XOG request. I can come here and I can grab an XML file. So I'm going to pull my XML file from here. I'm going to copy this, paste it. You say run XML. You can attach the results in an email. So this email is whatever email you have on your profile. Okay. And you can send notification via email once it's processed. So, if you want to have just an email saying that it's been completed, or you can come to the bulk request section and you click browse and you take a look and you look for that file. So here I can say I want this file. And once you upload it, you click run file. So that's the option that you want to select if you have a large file, okay? All right, the next thing, and I'm basically going to cover the basic XOG, and then I'm going to cover the query information, okay? So the next thing I'm going to cover is how do we actually run a query against the Clarity environment. So you go to Tools, right, and you have two options. You can actually write your own SQL query, and what this does is this will transform the SQL into NSQL. Okay, or you can take a look and look for your existing NSQLs that you have in your environment, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to select something. I'm going to select actually a resources read. So I'm going to look out for something around resources. So this basically is my list of all the NSQLs that I have within inside of my Clarity environment. And I'm going to say I want to grab my NSQLs. Here you can add filters. So if you want to add filters, you want to filter by a particular value, right? But in this case, I don't want to filter. I'm just going to grab everything that's within inside of that. So I'm going to say run this query. Okay. So like I said, what this does is this utilizes what's called the query API. This extracts all of the data within inside of that environment and brings it out to me. So now what I want to do is I actually want to download, so I'm going to export this data to Excel. I click that twice here. So this is that particular data extract. So this is a very handy tool for you to have. It's not only good just for running and extracting queries, but I'm going to actually show you how you can actually utilize this tool in combination with our Data Loader tool to be able to manipulate data, okay? Because you can now extract data from Clarity, manipulate it in Excel, and map it so you can push it back in, okay? And, for all of the templates that we provide on our mapping tool, we actually have corresponding queries that will map that data to it. Obviously, there are a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. One of them is, Excel generally, I don't know why in this case it's not doing that, but in general, it puts true or false in uppercase. XOG is expecting it in lowercase. There are a couple of things that you will have to, in generally, just manipulate. So now that we've extracted this data, let's say we wanted to migrate some data, and we want to migrate some resource data. So the step that you want to do is you want to grab and you want to migrate. I'm gonna say briefly here. We want to migrate all of our resources from our dev environment to our test environment, okay? And we want to individually run them. So ideally, what do we need to do? We need to do a resource read from our source environment, and we want to do it individually because we actually want to manipulate some of the XML files in flight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to our Data Loader tool, and I'm going to say we want to create a new template. Okay, and I'm going to say this is a demo resource read, and this will read the resources from system. So what I want to do is I want to actually put in a template read file. So I'm going to grab a template read file and I'm going to paste it in here. Okay. So what this is expecting, this particular window is expecting, is an XML file. Okay, and you notice here for the filter, I have a resource ID and I put it in $ squarely brackets and a particular ID. So what this tells this tool is this is our syntax for the variable. So what this tells our tool is this is the variable that you can map to. So here I'm going to say I'm going to save it and click next. Okay. So now that I've saved it and clicked next, okay, you can see that the XML variable is that particular variable that I've actually put inside of that. So I'm going to actually look for that XML file that we've just read, and I'm going to say, and actually this is the one that we had. All right, so you notice here, the first thing we get is we get a drop-down, and this drop-down says none because by default, the Excel file doesn't have a header value that matches this particular value, okay? So we're going to say we want this to be the username, okay? So that means we're going to change the resource ID variable with the username that's coming from that file that we actually read from Clarity, okay? And here I'm going to click Next, okay? And you can see in here, this basically builds us a sample XML file, and here I'm going to say, well, all right, so this looks like admin. I'm going to take a look at a bunch of these resources, make sure that, you know, they look correct. And you can see as I switch through, it's actually changing this particular value. So I say, all right, that looks good. That my XML file looks fine. So now what I'm going to say is I'm going to say I want to run this file, okay? And I want to attach the results in an email, and I want to send notification once it's complete, and I click OK. So now what this is going to do is this is going to build one XML file, one XML read file for each one of the records that are in that Excel file. Okay, and it's going to read those files out. So there are, you know, I'm going to cover why we want to do all of this stuff in a little bit. So what I want to do first of all is I'm going to stop, because this might take a couple of seconds to process. I'm going to stop and open up the question bar to see if anyone has any questions before we continue. I see some questions. I'm going to start from the bottom up. It says, the first question I have is, when you write a SQL query, can it show the query and SQL apart from the results? Well, it doesn't, but it provides you the ID, so you can actually go into Clarity. Once it creates the query, you can go into Clarity and look for that particular ID and look for that SQL. So it'll dynamically turn that SQL into NSQL. Another question I have is there any issue regarding Clarity versions? No. So what we utilize here is we utilize what's called the SOAP API. So the SOAP API is relevant to versions of Clarity. So the only thing that's important is to make sure that your actual XOG call, your XOG method is correct. Okay. Is this available in the user guide? So I'm going to stop here for a couple of seconds and talk about the user guide. So we're going to be off. We've just moved the user guide to an online version. And yes, absolutely, there is a user guide available for you to be able to do all the variable names within inside of here. So you can actually find the user guide directly on here. We're going to be publishing, so everyone that's on this webinar, as well as everyone that's a registered XOG user, will get the link to our new user guide. The next question is, for the automatic and SQL conversion, how complicated of a query can it translate? That's a good question. It accepts the way it basically works is it builds what I call an inline view. So, you know, you select X, Y, Z from, and then we populate your NSQL within inside of that. But it doesn't do data conversions or any of that. If you need to do that, then that's what I recommend you do, is you build your SQL within an inline view. So you would say select A, B, C from, and in there you put a nested SQL that contains all of your functions. So it doesn't actually do any function changes in flight. The next question is, does it validate your SQL? Yes, it'll tell you if your SQL is valid or not. But like I said, you want to maintain your SQL statements. So you want to select everything within inside of your select statements should be simple. Meaning, if you want to have any functions or anything else, you want to have that with inside of an inline view to prevent any problems. Okay. Because like I said, NSQL isn't necessarily the easiest tool to deal with, so what we try to do is we just wrap it with inside of the tags. Also, it doesn't do multiple dimensions, it just does single dimensions. This is mainly used for troubleshooting on-demand environments. For example, you know, you need to run a query against an on-demand environment or anything, and you don't necessarily want to log into the database. This is the perfect way to do it, right? So I can come here, I can go to execute a query, and I can say select ID from SRM resources, and this is the ID that it's going to build that NSQL with inside of Clarity. And here I can say run query. So what the first thing it does is it zogs that query into Clarity, builds the NSQL, okay, and then pumps out the results. So if I was to go into that particular Clarity environment, it's going to show you what that query would look like. So here's that particular query, right? So select ID from, and you can see here we build that nested NSQL on the from. So the next question is, do we at any point need to Clarity DB passwords when using the XOG tool? No, we utilize the Query API, so there's no need for database connection. Like I said, it utilizes, everything's done through the API layer, which means as long as you can connect to Clarity, you should be good. That's the only username and password that you would require. All right, I'm gonna come back into here, and I'm going to actually go back into that result set that we generated. So this is the demo resources read.zip that we generated, okay, for each one of those files. So I'm going to actually download this, and I'm going to copy that onto a folder here and unzip it. It doesn't want to complete the download here for some reason. Well, luckily, since it doesn't want to finish this download, luckily I actually ran a trial yesterday, so I'm gonna go through the particular demo that I actually ran yesterday, so I can have So here, this is basically what that particular resources read file looks like, okay? There are key important things to note. One of the key things that this tool does for you is it renames the files, okay? And you notice here it has a T1, okay? And IUF0 file, okay? What that means is it has a total, okay? And that particular, so T equals total, inserted, updated, or failed, okay? So now you can actually take a look directly at your file structure, and just by looking at the names, you can see what your XOG results were, okay? But in this case, because it's just a read file, right? So all it does is it generates that particular read file for that current read. So I'm gonna, okay, hang on, let's see if this is, I'm gonna try and download this again so we can. Okay, so now I can show you the exact example that we've got here. So I'm going to grab the zip file from here and unzip it. So it basically took that file, okay, read it, and executed that against our Clarity environment, okay? So now we have a read file for each one of the resources that was in our system, okay? All right. But before I continue, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to say, well, you know, I have a need to take all of the resources in my Clarity environment and update that data and make them all inactive. Okay, so I'm going to come here, I'm going to say, I'm going to go to Tools, I'm going to go to the Data Loader, okay, and I'm going to see if there's a template. So I'm going to take a look at this template that's provided here, okay, and I would say that, yeah, I could probably use this template. So I'm not going to update the OBS, so I'm going to delete the OBS. I'm not interested in the financial information. I'm not interested in updating any custom information or management or contact information. All I really want to do is update the active. So I'm going to say I don't need necessarily the external, and I don't need the resource type, and you know, I don't even need the personal information. So now I've got my base XML. All right, so here I'm going to say save and next. And now you can see that it basically puts all the XML variables that are in that squirty bracket $ syntax. And now what I want to do is I want to look for an XML file that I want to map to. And the file that I'm going to grab is that file that I extracted from Clarity. Okay? So I say this is the file that I want. I'm going to say open. Okay? Now you notice that if the Excel file has the same header name as the tag name, it automatically maps it. If it doesn't, it'll ask for a mapping. So here, the include in data mart, for example, doesn't have one, so I'm going to look for that, the one that has include in data mart, and we have a different syntax that comes out of the query, and it says lower LWR, and here for username, we have key underscore for username, resource ID. Resource ID is active. LWR is active, and resource ID. Okay, so ideally you would like your query to match, if you extract your query and your query happens to match the tag name, it'll automatically map it for you, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click next. And like I said, it'll automatically grab that data and put it, in here as the data that comes directly from that Excel file, okay? So you can literally come and grab that Excel file. So I'm going to open that Excel file. And you can say, well, I want the active to be false. Oh, I didn't enable editing. Oh, that was for a different file. And I'm actually going to go back here because I'm going to make sure that it utilizes that new file. So you can see now it has all the is active equals to false as it's coming from that XML file. So here I can say, well, I like the way this XML looks. Now I can just literally click and say run file. So I want to attach the results in an email, and I'm going to click OK. Now this might take a couple of seconds. So while this processes, I'm going to open up the question board again to see if anyone has any questions. So I'm going to start reading off the questions, but please feel free to ask away. It says, when running execute query post execute, do we need to delete the query from Clarity, or XOG Bridge does it itself? It doesn't actually delete the query. It'll create a query with that ID. So keep in mind, XOG has limitations. XOG either creates or updates. There's very few actions within XOG that allow you to delete. So no, it does not delete anything. It'll overwrite it. So if you don't change the ID, it'll use a default ID for you, which is username, XOG username underscore QB temp. So if you have a query and you write a new one, it'll literally just overwrite the existing one that's there. I see another one that says, this is awesome, very impressive. Thank you. I guess that wasn't really a question, but I appreciate that. I'm glad you guys enjoy it. Does the run file mean create the file to be zogged in or do the zog? So I assume we're talking about the building of the messages. So once, if you're within inside of the data loader tool, okay, the run file means the files have already been created. What you're doing is you're pushing that to Clarity. So here you can see that this is the particular. I'm going to open up the filter, and I want to say filter. Although I don't like the fact that it says 634, that means that there's something wrong with that XML file, which is not updating those records. Because this number should be going down. All right, so the next question is, does it handle special characters in the XML, like out-of-the-box CMN categories lookup for non-EN languages? I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit. It does handle it, but unless you're using those non-EN languages, I don't know why you would want to use it. Like I said, all this really does is it takes whatever's in your notepad and sends it via SOAP services to Clarity. Okay, so it'll handle anything that your notepad will handle. But I wouldn't. If you're using non-EN languages, I would recommend using an XSLT file to manipulate that data, and I'm going to show you some examples on some XSLT on how to remove language codes that are non-EN. Can the data loader be used to modify entries in the rate matrix? I would recommend, because I know who this is, I'm going to recommend, Walter, that we do this offline. No, it cannot, because the problem with the rate matrix is rate matrix is a sweep and replace, meaning all of the records must be done in one XML file. So it takes whatever is existing there and replaces it. This particular data loader, the way it works is it builds one file per record. Okay, so because you're building one file per record, really what you would be doing would be replacing every line with the next line. But Walter, there are options for you. That we can talk offline later that you guys actually already have. Next question is, how can we use the desktop version of this tool? Can we download and provide app server and database details? I assume you're talking about the data loader. So as far as the data loader is concerned, no, to build the files, you need to build them online, unless you happen to be at a company that has this installed with inside of their environment. You build it online, and what you do is, instead of running it to Clarity, you can download a zip file. And once you download the zip file, you can then run it on your desktop version. We are offering companies that if they want to install this particular XOG Bridge component with inside of their organization, the web version, we are providing that. But as it stands right now, you would have to build your files within inside of our web version and then download the zip file to run within inside of your desktop version. Does the XOG output file when XML XOG is complete formatted, or is it the same as XOG output from client? So, like I said, it would be running this directly from here or running it from the XOG.client is exactly the same. You know, it uses the exact same protocol. So I'm not sure if that answered your question or not. If it didn't, you know, I can gladly assist. I got another question here. It says, I've heard that the XOG bridge is going to be used to enhance the power and utility of the PPM Excel Enterprise Edition. I've been asked a question by existing users how the XOG tool can be used to enhance their deployment of their Excel Enterprise. So, you know, this might be a very specific question, but this is for the users that use the Excel interface for updating data, and this goes back to the question of the rate matrix. So the rate matrix, that would be a perfect example where you would want to use the Excel interface. So the Excel interface actually allows you to group records together to send them in one shot, as well as gives you the ability to extract, you know, and specifically with rate matrix, because rate matrix is so complicated and it does a sweep and replace. It actually extracts the existing rate matrix, saves it for you in case whatever you send is a mistake and you want to restore back to what it was. And I think that's it for questions at the moment. So I'm gonna continue where I was at. So here we're in the XOG request. We've executed this this custom zip file. That particular zip file basically contains. So now what we were able to do is we were able to extract data from within inside of Clarity. We're able to map data into a read file, extract that data, and then we were able to grab that read file, modify that read file, map it back to Clarity, and map changes back into Clarity. So I'm going to take a look and see what that data looked like. So here I'm going to download the file that came from here. So here, okay, remember I said, you know, this isn't updating anything. I could probably see that there's a problem. I can tell right away by the file name that there's a problem because my T, which is the total, equals 0. What that means is that I got a bad XOG response, therefore there's no total, okay? You know, so here, obviously there was a problem with my XML information, okay? It says uncompleted content model expecting personal information, which means the template that I used to load that data was incorrect. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to come back to my data loader. And I'm going to use this particular one. No, so this is the one that we just loaded that contained the invalid information. And let me see if, so. I think this was the file that I downloaded. Yeah, I think, so there obviously there was something wrong with that original XML file. So it is important that you actually check your XML file. Oh, run, including data mart is external. Okay, so here, that particular file actually contains all of my XML files. So I'm going to go back to the question for a second that was asking about using the desktop version. So within inside of the desktop version, what you would want to do instead of running the file, so you can only run the file here really if you're on demand or if this URL can see your Clarity URL. If you are on premise, okay, what you want to do is you want to say download the zip file. And what that does is that downloads the created XML files for each one of these. Okay. In this case, I'm just going to say run the file and click OK. So, like I said, what this allows you to do now is extract data from within inside of Clarity, manipulate data, and push that data back in. Okay. It allows you to utilize the extraction tool to convert read files, okay? So you can do data migrations, data extractions. You can use it as a bulk update tool. There's a lot of benefits that you can use, and I know that we only have a few minutes or 10, 15 minutes left inside of this call. I would like to open up the question board to see if there's a particular need that somebody might need to do that they would like to understand how they could use this tool to perform that example. So I got one question here. It says, you guys are doing good. Are you planning to add how to read, write blobs in future releases? For example, allocating resources to a project for 20 hours, but XML file needs some calculations. That's not necessarily true. The XML file, the read and write for blobs, that's out of the box XOG functionality that it does in flight. So there's really nothing that we can do except, there is, if you go into the data loader component, we do have an allocations example that you can use to map to. So you can actually do allocations. You want to be, with allocations, they're a little bit, I'm going to say finicky, but it's absolutely doable. Somebody says, I need to be able to import risks. All right, so you're going to come directly into the data loader tool. You're going to look and see if we have an example. We have a template for risks, right? So this is what the XML would look like. Okay. If you need, you can just download the Excel template. Okay. If you download the Excel template, this will give you the exact value of what that CSV should look like. Okay, so here, so these are the fields. As long as you populate these fields, you just click it, it'll automatically map to that XOG file, and literally it's as easy as you go here, you go next, you select that CSV file with the populated data, this will automatically map. You click next, run, done. And if you need assistance on doing that, feel free to reach out to us. We'll gladly walk you through how you need to do that. I'm not, I have a question that says, if you zog out instead of 20 hours XML, say 0.1212, for example. I'm not necessarily sure what you're talking about. I assume the difference is, you're changing segments would be the most likely. And yes, XML requires an FTE value. It doesn't accept hours. But that's a simple calculation that you do, which is basically availability divided by allocation, and that'll give you your FTE. Can you read the data and send it to a SOAP message to another endpoint? Yes, of course. So I don't know if here I'm gonna pick a file here quickly so I can continue with this example, so I can show you exactly. So here I'm gonna grab the risk value. There's no zogs to execute, of course, because there's no messages, there's nothing. But here, once you click on Run File, you can select what environment you're going to. So yes, you can absolutely read from one and push to another. Can I load data to custom objects? Of course, custom objects is just a different XML, right? All this is, let's say that this is an interface for Zog, right? So, what you load and what you don't load, that just depends on the SOAP message that you're trying to send. But of course, you can do a custom object read, custom object write. That's just a base XML file. I think, believe it or not, I think that's it for questions at the moment. Oh, I was wrong. If you were to cite the single most powerful use case that you've seen since the launch of Zog Bridge, what would it be? Wow. We started off with the Zog Bridge with just the ability to be able to Zog data, which means what we tried to do is when 13.3 came out and they replaced the Zog.client window and they removed it, we wanted to provide clients the ability to still be able to do that, okay? And then through popular demand or I'm going to say also our internal needs, there was the need to be able to run queries. But I would say that the data loader component, so the ability to be able to map Excel files to Zog files has been huge. People are, I would say that the use of the tool since we added the data loader, I think went up like 30,000%. So, that's 300x type of thing since we added the data loader. So I'm going to guess that the data loader was a big addition to that. I've got a question as well. It says, is there a custom object template? Yeah, I mean, if you, so there's several places. What I would recommend you do is if you download the Zog client or you go to CA documentation, there are, when you install Zog, there's an XML folder. Within inside of that XML folder, you will find the custom object template. And what you want is custom object instance read, because obviously every custom object is going to be different, and you read out that particular object instance so you have a template for that write file. Can you schedule, another question, can you schedule when you run the query? Yes. I'm going to say yes and no. I'm actually going to go to a different URL here so I can show you how that works. So we have a component called the Integration Manager. The Integration Manager basically allows you to read, write, schedule, and run all of these jobs directly. So, and this is also what we use for the Excel interface. It's basically our middleware component that allows you to send messages, schedule messages, and manipulate messages in flight, as well as log and audit all of your information that's coming in and out of Clarity. So for those of you, and I know that I've seen a few names that I recognize that have this product already installed or use our cloud version of this product, you would need to have this to be able to schedule any jobs, and that would be whether you want to execute or if you want to, you know, more elaborate components, like to be able to send the results to an FTP or send them to a network drive or that kind of thing. You would need this component. But yes, absolutely, you can schedule your integrations. And like I said, feel free. You can go to our website, IT-ROI-solutions.com, and you can see the integrations that we offer out of the box for this interface. I think that's it that I have for questions. You know, we have 3 minutes left for anybody that might want to have any other questions. I hear an awesome thank you, but that I appreciate that, but that wasn't really a question. So I'm going to turn this over to Christopher.
Hey, Federico, thank you so much for going into that in such depth. That was really awesome. At first, I thought the thank yous were for my great introduction, but humbly, I've learned that they were for you going through all of this information. And one of the things I wanted to do to follow up is that if you have any questions at all on how to utilize this, one of the things I have visibility into is that a lot of people ask questions right through our customer support at IT-ROI Solutions. And when Federico volunteers his time to help you out, I've been present when he's jumped on calls with people that are utilizing the tool and showed them a script or something that really makes a big impact for them. So be bold and step out there and utilize the tool to its fullest, and you know, lean on our help. So again, I want to thank Mark, our creative director, who put all this together, and Federico for spending the time, and for everybody who took time out of their day to attend. Again, we'll look forward to seeing you on the website. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to send you the replay video and the supported files that were with it, so that you can look through that and take anything that you may not have had time to jot the notes down on. So with that, I'll let you guys get back to managing projects and XOG files and all of that. Thank you to everybody.